Now, his question is what I would call a grand strategy question. And what you want to think about is American grand strategy. And when you think about American grand strategy, first point is the Western Hemisphere, because it's our backyard, is the most important area of the world for us. Canada and Mexico matter more to the United States than any other country on the planet, because you're our neighbors. It's the Western Hemisphere. So the Western Hemisphere is really important. The much more interesting issue is what other areas of the world matter to Uncle Sugar, right? And there are three of them. One is Europe, two is Asia. Historically, it was Northeast Asia. I'll say more about that in a second. And third, it was the Persian Gulf. So during the Cold War, when I used to lecture on American grand strategy, I'd say outside the Western Hemisphere, there are three areas of the world that matter to us. Europe is number one, Northeast Asia is number two, and number three is the Persian Gulf. Those are the three areas. Europe and Northeast Asia matter because that's where other great powers are, and the Gulf matters because that's where the oil is. Notice I didn't say the Middle East, okay? For all of our history, I'm talking about the United States here, Europe has been the most important area of the world. Before we went into World War II, we had a Europe first policy. And even though the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor, we had a Europe first policy during the war. Why? Because Europe is the most important area of the world. During the Cold War, when we used to run war games, Central Europe was like a giant magnet. It used to just suck forces, American forces, from all over the planet to Europe. Why? Because that's where the Soviet threat was, right? Our Asian allies used to go ballistic because we had the swing strategy. We'd swing forces out of Asia to Central Europe. Why? Because that's where the fight was, right? Europe was number one. The United States is now undergoing a fundamental transformation in its grand strategy. East Asia, not Northeast Asia, and I'll explain that in a second. East Asia is the number one area of the world for us. The number two area of the world for us is the Persian Gulf. And the number three area, way back, is Europe. Now, why is this the case? The rise of China, East Asia, right? Remember, when we used to worry about Northeast Asia, the reason we didn't worry about Southeast Asia was China was not a great power. It was the Soviet Union, Japan. That's why Korea mattered. Soviet Union, Japan, China, all up there. But down there was just China. Southeast Asia didn't matter, okay? But now China matters, so we care about Northeast Asia, we care about Southeast Asia. Oh, by the way, we care about Central Asia, right? We care about Southwest Asia, not surprising, okay? So Asia, mainly East Asia, is the number one area of the world for us. Why does the Gulf matter? The Gulf matters because China now gets 25% of its oil from the Gulf, and that number just goes up over time. Talk to the Chinese. They're building a blue water navy. Chinese are building a blue water navy so they can protect their sea lines of communication into the Gulf. So you can rest assured that the Chinese are going to become more and more influential in the Gulf, right? And this is why the Indians, by the way, India, as in India, Pakistan, the Indians are scared stiff of the Chinese because they understand the Chinese are coming out of East Asia, through the South China Sea, through the Straits of Malacca, into the Indian Ocean. Oh my God, there's the Chinese baby, right? And into the Gulf, because they get all that oil from the Gulf. So the Gulf and East Asia are inextricably linked. So you see, we're fundamentally shifting our thinking away from Europe. And Europe doesn't matter anymore. Europe is basically a giant museum. That's why you all go. That's why you all go to Europe, right? It's a museum. Seriously, they don't make babies anymore. So all these countries are shrinking, right? There's no potential hegemon. There's no potential hegemon. This is why the Europeans are so scared today, because they understand there's no real reason for us to be there. Many people say, what about the Russians? Oh, come on. The Russians are a declining great power. They're depopulating. They're not modernizing their economy. They're in trouble over the long term, right? And furthermore, the Russians have never, they tried to conquer Eastern Europe once. They've been there, done that, didn't work very well. The last thing you want to do is do that again. If you really want to wreck Russia, encourage them to try and swallow Ukraine. That's like swallowing a porcupine, right? It's not. The Russians are not a big problem. And furthermore, if you do believe the Russians are a problem, you believe I'm wrong, that they're not a declining great power, the Europeans can take care of themselves. Let the Germans, the French, the British, and the Poles form a balancing coalition. Why do we have to do it? For us, what really matters is Asia. So what you're going to see happen here, you remember Hillary Clinton, 2011. What did she refer to? The pivot to Asia? Think about the pivot to Asia. When you talk about pivoting to someplace, that means you're pivoting away from someplace. So if we're pivoting to Asia, where are we pivoting away from? Well, in the Pentagon, they want to pivot away from the forever wars. But the other thing you're going to pivot away from is Europe. And I say to the Europeans when I go there, because the Europeans live in mortal fear that Uncle Sugar will leave, because you know we're the pacifier in Europe. Can you believe they gave the EU the Nobel Peace Prize? This is a joke. This is scandalous. They should have given NATO the Nobel Peace Prize. It's the American pacifier that keeps the peace. That's why there has never been a single European leader who's called for the United States to leave Europe, because they understand how powerful we are for keeping the peace there. But the problem that they face is they understand that as China continues to rise, the pressure on us to shift our forces out of Europe and NATO and move to East Asia go up precipitously. So when I go to Europe, I tell them very simply, you folks have a deep-seated interest, getting back to this gentleman's question, in hoping that China does not continue to grow at a rapid economic pace. Because if it doesn't grow at a rapid economic pace, it will no longer be a potential peer competitor, and we can stay in Europe and keep the peace. But if it grows, and you do things to make us angry, right, which is very easy to do when it comes to the United States, as all the Canadians in the room understand, right? We may leave. And again, that means taking away the American pacifier.